The wind howled across the barren land, carrying sharp crystals of ice that cut against the skin like tiny blades. The world was known among explorers as a deathworld, a planet where every hour was a fight for survival. The human traveler had set up his small tent before the storm grew stronger. But even inside, the cold seemed to creep through every gap. Making his breath visible in the dim light, he pulled his jacket tighter and listened. The storm outside roared, but beneath the noise, he thought he heard something unusual. At first, he believed it was only the wind twisting into strange patterns. But then it came again, faint, broken, almost like a cry. His heart quickened. No human lived here. He was supposed to be alone. Curiosity pulled at him. Logic told him to stay inside, conserve energy, and wait for the storm to pass. But the sound came once more, a weak and desperate call, and he could not ignore it. Against his better judgment, he pushed open the tent flap and stepped into the freezing night. Snow blinded his vision, swirling around like white fire. He trudged forward, his boots sinking deep into the powder. Each step felt heavier than the last, but he followed the sound. Then, through the storm, he saw a faint glow on the ground. Something was lying there. He approached cautiously, his pulse racing. It was not human. A slender figure lay curled in the snow, shivering violently. Her skin shimmered with faint lines of light, glowing as if starlight ran through her veins. She looked young, fragile, and utterly helpless. The alien girl barely opened her eyes, her lips trembling as she tried to speak in a language he could not understand. For a moment, he froze. Bringing her back would be dangerous. She might be infected, she might be a threat, and his tent was barely large enough for himself. But the way she trembled, the way her glow flickered like a candle close to burning out, it struck something deep within him. If he left her here, she would not survive the night. The human bent down and lifted her carefully. She was lighter than he expected, but the icy air had stiffened her body. Her skin felt cold, almost like frozen metal under his gloves. The storm grew harsher, pushing against him with every step back, but he forced himself to move faster. Each gust threatened to throw him off balance, but the thought of leaving her there never crossed his mind again. Finally, he stumbled back to the tent, pulling her inside. The warmth inside was weak, but it was better than the merciless storm outside. He laid her down on the floor, covering her with his thermal blanket. Her faint glow dimmed further, as if her life itself was slipping away. He quickly set the small heater closer, adjusting the flame to give as much warmth as possible. The girl's eyes fluttered open once more. She looked at him, fear and confusion in her glowing gaze. She tried to push herself up, but her strength failed. He raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm, and spoke softly, though he knew she could not understand his words. "Easy. You're safe here, just stay alive." Her breathing was shallow, uneven. She whispered something, her words like music carried on broken breaths. He did not know her language, but the tone carried desperation and perhaps a plea for help. He felt the weight of her trust, even if it was only for this moment, resting on his shoulders. As the storm raged outside, the tent seemed like the only fragile bubble of life on the entire planet. The human sat close, watching her chest rise and fall, uncertain if she would make it through the night. Every sound of the storm felt louder, like a reminder that death was waiting just beyond the thin walls of fabric. He wondered who she was. Why was she here, alone in the storm? Was she lost? Was she running from something? The glow of her veins fascinated him, something beautiful in a place so cruel. But at the same time, it frightened him. She was not just an alien. She was something rare, maybe even dangerous still. As she shivered under the blanket, he could not bring himself to regret his choice. He had saved her, even if it meant risking his own survival. Time passed slowly. The heater flickered, the wind screamed, and the cold pressed harder against the thin walls. Yet inside, two strangers, one human, One alien shared the same fragile hope. To see the dawn, the human leaned back, exhaustion pulling at him, but he kept his eyes open. He knew the night was only beginning. He had no idea that this decision, inviting the alien girl into his tent to warm up, would set events into motion far greater than he could imagine. And outside, beneath the storm, something else moved. Heavy footsteps, muffled by snow, circled faintly in the distance. The night was not as empty as he had thought. The storm outside grew even louder, its icy fingers clawing at the thin fabric of the tent. The human sat in silence, watching the alien girl curled beneath his thermal blanket. Her skin still glowed faintly, but the shimmer came and went like a weak pulse of light. He wondered if she would survive the night, or if he had only delayed the inevitable. Inside the cramped shelter, every movement mattered. The tent was built for one person, and now two bodies occupied the tiny space. He could feel the cold still seeping through the ground, even though he had placed insulated mats beneath them. The small heater hissed softly, but it wasn't enough. He leaned closer, making sure the blanket covered her completely. Her eyes opened again, slow and cautious. They glowed like tiny lanterns, casting strange reflections across the tent walls. For the first time, she studied him, her gaze not only fearful but curious. He could tell she was trying to understand why he had not abandoned her. "Warm," he said slowly, pointing to the heater and then to the blanket. He repeated the word, hoping she might catch its meaning. She blinked, tilting her head slightly, as though his strange tongue puzzled her. After a moment, she whispered something soft in her own language. The words were delicate, almost like the sound of a bell carried on the wind. He shook his head, frustrated by the barrier between them. Still, the tone of her voice was clear. Gratitude. The human reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar. He broke it in half and offered it to her. At first, she hesitated, her glowing fingers trembling as she stared at the unfamiliar food. Slowly, she took it. She sniffed it carefully before nibbling at the edge. To his relief, she didn't spit it out. She chewed, swallowed, and then looked at him with cautious approval. For a brief moment, they both smiled. It was small, fleeting, but real. Then outside, the storm shifted. The wind carried a new sound, deep, heavy, rhythmic. It wasn't the chaotic howl of nature. It was deliberate. Footsteps. The human froze. His instincts sharpened. He had been in dangerous places before, and he knew the sound of something or someone moving with purpose. He glanced at the girl, who had suddenly gone rigid. Her glow pulsed brighter, her eyes widening in fear. She knew the sound. "Who is out there?" He whispered, though he knew she couldn't understand. She pressed her hand against his arm, shaking her head sharply. Her expression was clear enough. "Don't go outside." He leaned back, his mind racing. If someone or something was hunting her, then bringing her into his tent might have marked him too. The thin walls offered no protection from predators. The heater's glow, the faint light of her skin, the smell of food, all of it could be seen or sensed. The girl reached beneath the blanket and pulled something out. It was small, metallic, and glowing faintly blue. A device of alien design. She held it close to her chest, whispering softly to it, as though speaking to a friend. Then, with trembling fingers, she held it out for him to see. The human studied it. The device looked like a stone polished to a perfect sphere, with patterns etched across its surface that shifted as though alive. When she pressed a sequence, the sphere flickered, showing tiny bursts of light like a star map. His breath caught. He recognized some of the constellations. They weren't just decorative. They were directions. She looked at him, her eyes pleading. She whispered again, this time repeating a single word slowly. "Safe." Safe. It was the first word he understood. Before he could respond, the sound outside grew louder. The footsteps were closer now. Something brushed against the outer layer of the tent, making the fabric ripple. He grabbed his flare gun from his pack, holding it tightly. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The girl's glow dimmed, as though she were trying to hide it. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, curling into a smaller shape. Fear radiated from her like cold air, the human's mind filled with questions. Who was after her? Why did she carry that strange star map? Why did she seem so important and so afraid? He had no answers, only instincts. Instincts told him that whatever was outside, it wasn't friendly. Minutes passed like hours. The sound of movement circled the tent once more, then slowly faded into the storm. The human kept his weapon ready, eyes locked on the fabric walls, until only the natural howl of the wind remained. When he finally lowered the flare gun, his hands were still shaking. He looked at the alien girl who had not moved. She was staring at him, waiting to see what he would do next. He took a deep breath, then nodded slowly. "Safe," he repeated, pointing at her and then at himself. "Safe." This time she seemed to understand. She placed her glowing hand over her heart and whispered the word back to him, her voice fragile but steady. "Safe." The storm outside continued, but inside the fragile tent, something had shifted. Two strangers once, divided by fear and silence, had taken the first step toward trust. Neither of them knew that the true danger was only beginning. The storm weakened by morning, but the cold still bit like teeth. The human unzipped a corner of the tent and looked out. Snow stretched across the horizon, endless and cruel, with jagged rocks poking through like broken bones. The land was silent again, yet he could not forget the heavy footsteps that circled the tent hours earlier. He turned back to the alien girl. She had managed to sit upright, still wrapped in his blanket. Her glow was stronger now, no longer fading in and out. She held the strange sphere in her hands, tracing the living patterns across its surface. When she noticed his eyes on her, she spoke softly. Her language was still foreign, but then she repeated the one word he understood: safe. He nodded, though his gut told him safety was a fragile illusion. Something had been out there. Something still might be. The girl looked at the sphere again, pressed her fingers along its glowing lines, and suddenly, the device shifted. A holographic image projected above it, shimmering shapes of landscapes and mountains, spinning slowly in the air. The human leaned closer. He realized what he was seeing, a map of the very planet. Beneath their feet, the alien girl pointed to a glowing mark deep in the icy fields. She spoke quickly, her tone urgent. Though he could not understand the words, her meaning was clear. She wanted to go there. Why? He asked quietly, though he knew she couldn't answer. His voice was half to himself. What could possibly lie beneath this frozen wasteland? She looked at him again, her glowing eyes sharp, almost pleading. Then she leaned forward and drew a symbol on the frost-covered ground of the tent. It was simple, a circle, broken by jagged lines, but something about it made his chest tighten. It didn't look like decoration. It looked like a warning. Before he could ask, the earth beneath them rumbled faintly. The sound was so low, it felt more like a vibration than a noise. Both froze, eyes darting to the tent walls as loose snow drifted down from the roof. The girl whispered a word he didn't know, but her voice trembled with fear. She pressed the sphere tightly to her chest, her glow dimming again as if she wanted to hide. The human frowned. He had heard of icequakes on this world, sudden cracks in the frozen crust that swallowed camps whole. But this vibration felt alive, almost like movement beneath the ground. He checked his pack quickly. Supplies were low, but he still had a few rations and a portable scanner. He turned it on, pointing it at the ground. The screen flickered, showing strange heat signatures pulsing beneath the ice. His brows knit. Nothing that size should be moving under solid frozen rock. He looked at the girl. She already knew. Her expression confirmed what the scanner only suggested. Whatever was under the ice, it wasn't natural. The girl suddenly grabbed his wrist, startling him. Her skin was warm again, her glow stronger. She shook her head and whispered the same words she had said when the footsteps came. No. Then she pointed at the map again, at the glowing mark in the icy fields. Her eyes were desperate, almost begging him to understand. He swallowed hard. The choice weighed on him. He had come to this planet for research, not for war or rescue missions. Yet here he was, sitting in a tent with an alien girl carrying a star map and secrets buried beneath the ice. A low growl echoed outside, faint but clear. The sound was neither storm nor quake. It was alive. The girl pressed the device once more, and the projection shifted. This time, it showed not the planet but something hidden inside it. Caverns, structures, shapes, too perfect to be natural. His chest tightened. This wasn't just survival anymore. This world carried something ancient, maybe something forbidden. And the girl, she was connected to it. She touched her heart, then touched the glowing mark on the map, and finally touched his hand. Her message was unmistakable. She needed his help to reach it. The human sat back, the weight of her request sinking in. If he helped, he would step deeper into a mystery far greater than himself. If he refused, he would abandon her to the same storm and footsteps that haunted the night. For a long moment, silence filled the tent. Then slowly he nodded. "All right," he whispered. "We'll go." The girl's eyes softened, relief flickering across her face. She whispered something in her own language, her voice carrying both gratitude and sadness. But as the storm outside thinned, revealing pale light across the horizon, the human caught sight of something that froze his blood. Tracks, not his, not hers. Massive footprints stretched across the snow in a wide circle around the tent, leading toward the direction of the glowing mark on her map. Whatever was beneath the ice wasn't sleeping anymore. The pale light of dawn bled across the snow, but instead of comfort, it brought only dread. The human crouched outside the tent, studying the huge footprints pressed deep into the frost. Each step was wider than his chest, and the edges of the prints were sharp, as if claws had dug into the ice. Whatever had been circling the tent during the night wasn't just passing by. It had been watching. The alien girl remained inside, clutching the glowing sphere. Through the thin fabric, he could see her faint outline, small, fragile, yet somehow radiant. When he stepped back into the tent, her glowing eyes locked onto his face. She didn't need translation to read the fear there. "Something is out here," he muttered, lowering his voice, though he knew she couldn't understand. Still, her expression told him she already knew. She had always known. The girl pressed the sphere again, and this time, the projection was different. A figure appeared, tall, armored, with jagged spikes across its body. Its silhouette looked monstrous, like a predator wrapped in metal. She pointed at the image, then at the tracks outside. Her voice trembled as she whispered a single word in his language, her accent heavy but clear enough to chill his blood. "Hunter." The human felt his chest tighten. This wasn't just survival against nature anymore. They were being stalked. He grabbed his flare gun and checked his pack. 2 signal flares, 1 knife, and a few rations, barely enough to scare a wild beast, let alone fight something intelligent. He looked at the girl, still curled beneath the blanket, and shook his head. "You didn't tell me they were after you," he whispered, frustration mixing with fear. She looked away, guilt flashing across her glowing features. But then she met his eyes again, firm, almost pleading. She placed her hand on her chest and whispered her word from before, "Safe," as if she was reminding him of his own promise. Before he could respond, the ground vibrated. A shadow passed across the tent wall. Heavy footsteps crunched closer, slow and deliberate. The human held his breath, his hand tightening around the flare gun. The fabric trembled. A sharp claw dragged slowly across the side of the tent, slicing a thin line in the material. A low growl followed, deep enough to shake his bones. The alien girl gasped, clutching the sphere tight to her chest. Her glow flared brightly, as though fear triggered it beyond her control. The tent lit up with her light. The growl outside stopped. Then, another sound followed like a hiss of recognition. The human cursed under his breath. They were exposed. "Stay down," he whispered fiercely. He pushed her lower, wrapping the blanket around her, as if fabric could hide her glow. Then he took a deep breath, ripped the tent flap open, and stepped outside with the flare gun raised. The world outside was silent, the storm finally gone. Snow stretched endlessly, reflecting the faint sunlight. And then he saw it. A massive figure stood 20 feet away. Taller than any human, its body covered in black armor that looked grown from bone and metal. Spikes jutted from its shoulders, and in its clawed hands, it held a spear tipped with crackling energy. Its eyes glowed red behind a mask that hissed with each breath. The hunter tilted its head, studying him as if amused by his pathetic weapon. Then it shifted, sniffing the air. Its gaze locked on the tent behind him, where the girl's glow still flickered faintly. "No," the human muttered under his breath. He stepped sideways, blocking the view of the tent. He raised the flare gun higher, his heart pounding. He knew it wouldn't kill the creature, but maybe, just maybe, it could blind or distract it long enough to escape. The hunter let out a sound, low and guttural. Not quite a laugh, not quite a growl. Slowly, it began to walk forward, each step sinking into the snow with heavy finality. The human's pulse thundered. His finger tightened on the trigger. The air crackled with tension, but before he could fire, the alien girl burst from the tent. Her glow exploded like a beacon, brighter than before, wrapping her in radiant light. She shouted something in her own language, her voice sharp and commanding. The hunter stopped. Its head tilted again, this time with recognition. It let out a harsher growl, raising its spear. The human's chest twisted. She had exposed herself. She was trying to protect him. "No!" He shouted and fired the flare. The red streak shot across the snow, exploding into a burst of fire and light. The hunter roared, staggering back and shielding its eyes. The human grabbed the girl's hand, pulling her close, and ran. Their boots pounded across the ice, the tent collapsing behind them as the hunter's furious howl echoed across the frozen plain. The girl clutched the sphere tightly, her glow dimming as exhaustion pulled at her. The human tightened his grip on her hand, his lungs burning with each breath. They didn't know where safety was. They didn't know if escape was even possible. But one thing was certain: the hunter had found them. And it would not stop. The frozen plain stretched endlessly before them, but the human and the alien girl kept running. Behind them, the hunter's roar still echoed, carried by the cold wind like thunder rolling across the ice. Each step felt heavier, each breath sharper in the freezing air. But the human refused to stop. He knew that if they slowed, the hunter would be upon them in moments. Finally, when his lungs burned and his legs threatened to give out, he spotted a jagged ridge of ice ahead. Sharp spires jutted upward like broken teeth, casting long shadows over the snow. Without hesitation, he pulled the girl toward it. Together, they squeezed through a narrow crack in the ice, stumbling into a hollow cavern beneath the ridge. Inside, darkness swallowed them. The storm outside muffled, replaced by the drip of melting ice echoing through the cavern. The girl collapsed against the frozen wall, clutching the glowing sphere tightly. Her light flickered weakly, barely enough to push back the shadows. The human crouched beside her, chest heaving. He set the flare gun down and pulled out a small lantern from his pack. With a flick, warm light filled the cavern, revealing walls covered in strange patterns lines etched into the ice itself. They weren't natural. They looked carved, purposeful, ancient. The girl noticed too. Her eyes widened as she traced the markings with trembling fingers. She whispered in her language, her voice reverent, almost afraid. Then she looked at him, pressing her hand against her chest, then toward the walls. He frowned. "This place. It's important to you, isn't it?" She nodded slowly, then opened her hand to reveal the glowing sphere. She pressed it against one of the carvings. Instantly, the walls responded. Blue light spread outward in lines, racing across the cavern like veins of fire beneath the ice. The humans stepped back in awe as symbols flared to life around them, filling the darkness with an otherworldly glow. The cavern wasn't just a hiding place. It was a sanctuary. The girl leaned against him, exhausted. For the first time, he didn't see her as just an alien stranger. She was vulnerable, alone, and hunted. Just like him, she was clinging to survival. He broke a ration bar in half and handed it to her. She hesitated, then accepted it with a faint smile. They ate in silence, the glow of the ancient walls surrounding them like stars trapped in the ice. After a while, he spoke softly. "Why are they after you?" Of course, she couldn't understand his words. But somehow, she seemed to sense the question. She placed the sphere between them and pressed it again. The projection returned, this time showing not maps, but figures beings like her, standing beneath the same glowing walls. Then the image shifted. Hunters appeared, taller, darker, striking them down. The light of her people dimmed, fading into darkness. The human stomach tightened. He understood enough. Her people were being hunted, destroyed. She wasn't just running for herself, she was running with something precious. Something the hunters wanted. She looked at him, her eyes shimmering with both sorrow and determination. She touched the sphere, then her heart, then his chest. Her meaning was clear. She had trusted him with her secret. He swallowed hard. "You really believe I can help you, don't you?" She didn't answer with words. Instead, she leaned closer, her small hand wrapping around his. Her skin was warm now, her glow steady. In the cavern's silence, the bond between them grew unspoken. Fragile, but real. For the first time, the human felt something more than fear. He felt responsible. Not just for her survival, but for the secret she carried. Their moment was broken by a sound that sent ice through his veins. A low growl, echoing through the cavern tunnels. The hunter had found the ridge. The girl's light dimmed instantly, her eyes wide with terror. She clutched his hand tightly, as if letting go would mean death. The human tightened his grip on the flare gun. "Stay close," he whispered. Even though she couldn't understand, the cavern's glow began to fade as the walls reacted to the presence of the intruder. The light shrank back into the carvings, leaving only the weak lantern to fight the darkness. But within that darkness, as the footsteps of the hunter echoed closer, two figures sat pressed together, sharing strength. The human knew the truth now. Alone, he wouldn't survive. Alone, she wouldn't either. But together, maybe they had a chance. And as the growl grew louder, shaking the ancient sanctuary around them, he realized something he hadn't before. It wasn't just about surviving the night anymore. It was about protecting the only bond he had left in this frozen world. The cavern trembled as heavy footsteps echoed through the icy tunnels. Each thud reverberated like a drumbeat of doom, shaking loose frost from the ceiling. The human gripped his flare gun tightly, sweat beading across his forehead despite the cold. The alien girl clung to his sleeve, her glow dimmed almost to nothing. Her fear was raw, unhidden. The hunter was close. The human quickly scanned the cavern walls. The glowing symbols had faded when the creature drew near, leaving only the faint lantern light flickering across the frozen stone. The silence between footsteps was almost worse than the sound itself. It meant the hunter was listening, tracking, waiting. He crouched lower, whispering softly to the girl, though he knew she couldn't understand. "We can't stay here. It'll corner us." She looked at him, eyes wide, then shook her head sharply. She touched the sphere again, projecting the holographic map of the tunnels. Her glowing finger traced a path, narrow passages leading deeper underground, far from the surface. A hidden way out. The human's jaw tightened. The deeper they went, the more dangerous it became. But the hunter was already blocking the main exit. It wasn't a choice, not really. He nodded once. "All right. Lead the way." They moved quickly but silently, slipping into the narrowest passage the map revealed. The walls squeezed close, forcing him to twist sideways to fit. The girl moved ahead with surprising agility, her faint glow guiding him like a star in the dark. Behind them, the growl came again, closer, angrier. The hunter had caught their scent. The tunnel twisted sharply, leading into a chamber that seemed impossibly vast. Blue crystals jutted from the walls, glowing faintly, lighting the cavern like a ghostly cathedral. The air hummed with energy, vibrating through his bones. The girl stopped suddenly, staring at the crystals with wide, tear-filled eyes. She whispered a single word, her voice trembling but filled with reverence. "Home." The human glanced at her. This is what you were trying to reach." She nodded slowly, then pointed toward the far side of the chamber. At first, he saw only ice and rock. But as he stepped closer, the truth revealed itself, a massive structure buried in the walls. Metallic, ancient, alive with faint pulses of light, it wasn't just a cavern. It was a tomb. Or maybe a sanctuary. The girl fell to her knees, pressing the sphere against the frozen floor. The entire chamber responded. The crystals brightened, and the buried structure's lights awakened, running in waves like blood through veins. The human staggered back, shielding his eyes from the sudden radiance. The sound of footsteps snapped him back to reality. The hunter had entered the chamber. Its towering frame filled the tunnel, armored and monstrous, eyes glowing red through its mask. It raised its spear, the crackling energy humming like a storm. The human raised the flare gun, but he knew the truth. It was useless now. The girl turned to him, tears in her glowing eyes. She shook her head, as if begging him not to fight. She placed her hand on her chest, then gestured toward the hunter, then back to him. Her meaning was brutal, heartbreaking. Leave her and live. His stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed at him to survive. Alone, he could slip through the side tunnels, maybe outlast the storm, maybe find another camp. If he stayed, he would almost certainly die. The hunter advanced, growling low, spear aimed straight at the girl. The human tightened his grip on the flare gun. His chest heaved with rapid breaths, his mind racing. He could leave. He could run. He could choose survival. But then he looked at her, this fragile being who had trusted him, who had shared her food, her secret, her fear. He thought of the words she had struggled to say in his language, the one she had clung to like a prayer. Safe. He stepped forward, planting himself between the girl and the hunter. His voice was raw but steady. "If death's coming," he muttered, "it'll have to go through me first." The girl gasped, reaching for him, her glowing hand trembling. For the first time, her eyes held not only fear, but something else. Faith. The hunter snarled, lowering its spear. Energy crackling across the blade, the human lifted the flare gun. Every muscle screaming, his heart hammering in his chest. In that moment, survival was no longer his choice. Trust was. The cavern glowed like a waking heart, its crystals pulsing with waves of blue light. The human stood firm, his small flare gun raised, his body a fragile wall between the alien girl and the towering hunter. The hunter hissed, lowering its jagged spear. Sparks of energy danced across the blade, lighting the chamber in violent flashes. Each step it took made the floor tremble. Its red eyes burned through the mask, locked not on the human, but on the girl crouched behind him. The girl's glow flickered wildly, her trembling hands clutching the sphere. She whispered frantically in her own language, her voice sharp with both fear and urgency. The human didn't need to understand. Her meaning was clear. The structure around them was not just a ruin. It was a weapon. The hunter lunged. The human fired the flare gun. The blinding streak of fire and light exploded against the hunter's armor, forcing it back with a roar. It wasn't enough to harm it, but it bought a single heartbeat of time. Enough. The girl pressed the sphere to the ground, and the chamber erupted. The crystals blazed with light, sending streams of energy into the buried structure. The floor shook violently, cracks racing through the ice as the ancient sanctuary awakened fully for the first time in centuries. The hunter staggered, raising its spear to strike again. But this time, the walls themselves fought back. From the structure, beams of radiant energy lanced outward, striking the hunter square in the chest. The creature roared in pain, its armor sizzling, smoke rising from its body. For the first time, it faltered. The human grabbed the girl's hand, pulling her upright. Her glow was steady now, merging with the light of the cavern. She was connected to it, maybe even part of it. The hunter snarled, furious, and raised its spear once more. But before it could strike, the girl stepped forward. Her small frame shone brighter than all the crystals combined, her voice echoing with strange resonance as if the entire chamber spoke through her. The hunter froze. Its red eyes flickered. For the first time, it looked uncertain. The human watched in stunned silence as the girl raised the sphere high. The walls pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, and the energy from the structure converged into a single beam of searing light. The beam struck the hunter like a thunderbolt. It let out a final roar that shook the cavern, then collapsed, its massive body crashing into the frozen ground. The red glow in its eyes went dark. Silence followed, heavy and final. The human lowered his flare gun, his chest heaving. Slowly, the girl turned back to him, her glow dimming to a softer, calmer light. She fell to her knees, the sphere slipping from her fingers as exhaustion overtook her. He rushed to her side, catching her before she hit the ground. "Hey, stay with me. You're safe now." Her eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly. She whispered a word, broken but clear in his language. "Safe, together." His throat tightened. For the first time since arriving on this death world, he believed it. The chamber around them hummed gently, the energy settling into a quiet rhythm. The structure no longer felt like a tomb or a weapon. It felt alive, protective, almost as if it had accepted them both. The human realized the truth then. By saving her, by choosing trust over survival, he had unlocked something far greater than he imagined. She wasn't just an alien girl. She was the last link to a hidden power buried beneath the ice. And now that power recognized him too. He looked at the sphere, still glowing faintly where it lay on the ice. He didn't understand its full purpose, but he knew one thing. The hunters wouldn't stop with just one. More would come. The girl leaned against him, her breathing steady but weak. She touched his chest lightly, her eyes soft, filled with something he couldn't mistake. Gratitude. In that moment, the human made a silent vow. He would protect her, no matter what it cost. Not just because he had saved her, but because in saving her, she had saved him too, from loneliness, from despair, from being just another nameless explorer on a cold, dead world. As they sat together in the glowing chamber, the storm outside finally broke. Pale sunlight filtered through cracks in the ice above, mingling with the alien light below. A new dawn had come, and neither of them would face it alone.